Good morning, class, and welcome to week 5. Thank you for keeping up on all of our collaborative reading, our shared slide deck, and our terms and concepts slash discussion board posts. You're doing fantastic, and I hope you enjoyed our reading last week, which was James Thurber's The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. In that unit, I wanted you to see the connections between how an artist both sketches and sort of sees the world and subsumes some of those thoughts and intentions and motivations within the actual text of a short story. And here I think James Thurber does a really fantastic job of kind of expressing in sort of short, witty prose how we can see this character, Walter Mitty, existing in this world of both dream, sort of straddling dream and reality. And so thank you again for all of your stellar comments and within our collaborative reading project, and also for looking at that short our feature called The Life in Hard Times that sort of explained, I think pretty carefully, the relationship between Thurber and his writing and Thurber and his sort of sketch life. Thank you also to all of you who've sort of either used the snipping tool or found sketches on the internet for kind of encapsulating some of those findings within that film. So thank you, Caleb, for talking about the pathways between office and home and the houses of settled people. There are always ready to snap at you the little perils of routine living, and that's sort of the subject of lots of Thurber writings. Joe, you kind of picked up on a writer can always write because his imagination doesn't go blind. Talking a little bit later in the film where we learn that Thurber is sort of losing his eyesight, and how does that transpire in terms of his fiction? How does that transpire in terms of his sketches? Thank you, Alexandria, too, for she was talking about Thurber's mother here. She was gifted with a great comedic sense, and her pranks were local legends. And so, who was Thurber's mother, and how does that have sort of influence on his sense of humor? Brendan, you were talking a little bit about, again, more pranks, stealing a wheelchair, rolling down the aisle, and standing up saying, I can walk, I can walk. A fine image there, a fine sketch. Tim, thank you for talking about how Thurber sort of related to his company. By having lost an eye young, Thurber became an outsider and an observer. And I think that's something that we see in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, how he's sort of on the outside, but certainly sort of in the inside in his daydreams, but certainly an outside observer figure in his absent almost nearly in his short story, the Mitty figure. Shreya, you picked up on the relationship between Thurber and his dog. So, and thank you also for noting sort of where in the film that happened. But another great sort of image, here's a study for you, doctor. He faints, and so he's holding a dog there. RJ, you picked up on this image of an American male tied up in typewriter ribbons. Excellent sort of correlation here between what was happening biographically, his movement to Columbus, and what's happening in the sketch. And last but not least, Abby, you talked about a little bit about sort of the gender issues here. Men are childish and the women are the adults. And so another great image. And I think that we see that primarily in the henpecked husband of The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. So nice work on picking up on some of those sentiments in the short story and the sketches. Thank you also for your own sketches, which I included under our announcements. I've tried to sort of combine, make a collage of all of the work that you did for your discussion board so you could kind of see more holistically what they all look like. And so thanks for sort of taking me up on that that assignment and kind of exploring your artistic side, artistic in terms of drawing. So fantastic drawings. I give you all responses in your discussion board posts, so please check those out. And I hope you enjoyed Walter for week 4. Please do check out the film, the sort of feature film. And if you get a chance, I didn't see it on Canopy, which is our free sort of database through COD, but you might be able to stream it through a different service, which, of course, adapts the 3-page short story quite heavily and And so I hope you enjoy that if you get a chance this summer to watch it. And I have the official trailer down here if anyone's interested. As we continue into this week, Unit 5, I want to have you continue thinking about this idea of realities, lived realities. And so The Secret Life of Walter Mitty straddling the dream world with sort of the real world, or perhaps the dream world was more the real world for him. But in Unit 5, we're going to be thinking about Charlotte Perkins Gilman's short story called The Yellow Wallpaper, which is a really sort of famous canonical text for reading short stories. And what it does is sort of lays the groundwork for this American feminist voice coming out in the 1890s. And so Charlotte Perkins Gilman is really representative and sort of phenomenal in the sense that she's bringing to voice some of these women voices of the time. For this particular unit, we're going to be thinking about this sort of literary theory term called intertextuality, and it's really just sort of a more complicated word that refers to basically a word that describes the need for one text to be read in light of its allusions to and differences from the content or structure of another text. So it's basically like using one text to sort of illuminate another text or to compare another text to. So intertextual, between texts. And what I'd like you to do for this week is to be thinking a little bit about how our short story, The Yellow Wallpaper, has any kinds of echoes or resonances of other stories we've read so far. I'll talk a little bit more about Charlotte Perkins Gilman in a second, but I wanted you to really think about sort of recognizing the way short stories functions as statements about life. So how does a short story tell us a little bit more about our own lived lives? What does it reveal about our fantasies, desires, and also problems or concerns? Especially in The Yellow Wallpaper. Here I have a sort of image from Charlotte Perkins Gilman's papers. This is actually sort of some more sketches by this author, and it's a partial poem. It's called Spoken To. It says, "Oh mother," said the little maid, "why do I wear a skirt and underclothes so scant and white, when both my both my duty and delight is to play in the dirt." And so here's some sketches of like the clothing that perhaps you would be wearing. And so what I'd like to do for this week is to think a little bit about how does intertextuality, this term about thinking about texts, responding to other texts, what does that mean for our short story? What does that mean for our author and our reading for this week? And so I want you to read just a little bit more about what exactly constitutes intertextuality itself. And to do that, I have a short excerpt below from a Google book, Graham Allen's Intertextuality, published in 2011. I also have a TED Talk that's pretty short, and it's about this idea of remix. So remix, in other words, more generally kind of the same concept, the same kinds of things we're seeing with this term called intertextuality. And so look at both of those things as a sort of foundation for our terms and concepts this week. And I'd like you to add, after you've sort of read through these two short paragraphs and watched this TED Talk, the short TED Talk, to add to our Google slide deck a substantial quotation from The Yellow Wallpaper. So you'll have to go down and read through that short story, which is a little bit longer than The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. So please sort of pace yourself. And I want you to include some sort of quotation that you find important. And then oppose this quotation from the short story and insert a copied and pasted image from a 2020 news source. Think like the New York Times, the Atlantic, BBC, Washington Post, The Guardian, that somehow relates or remixes the sentiment described in your excerpt. And so try not to take the excerpt totally out of context, but I want you to pick that excerpt and show for your reader, show for the people that are looking at your discussion board exactly what the relationship is between some of these sort of sentiments from the 19th century and what's happening in the 21st century. How are they relevant? So again, thinking about recognizing the way short stories functions as statements about life. How can we see this as sort of a relevant idea, relevant sort of thoughtscape in 2020. And so then in 200 words or less, describe what you found important and or meaningful about this short story and how this meaning has intertextual relevance to our contemporary moment. Publish this new page and paste the link in the discussion forum by clicking the Unit 5 Intertextuality title right here. Just click here and respond or comment to 2 other student posts by Friday. So this sort of thing will be due, create a thread on Wednesday, and typical sort of responses, just 2 responses by Friday. The other thing I wanted you to add to the intertextual slide deck, I think this is going to be sort of a fun activity, is to go through and after you've read through the paragraphs and watched the TED Talk, I'd like you to explore some intertextual moments within Perkins's own poems, drawings, correspondences. How do you do that? Well, there's this wonderful library at Harvard University called the Schlesinger Library, Charlotte Perkins Gilman Digital Collection, and it has a ton of different kinds of materials that you can look through that all sort of describe and encompass some context for Charlotte Perkins Gilman's life. It has a clipping of her hair from when she was 3 years old. It has correspondences. It has photographs, and not shocking, also some drawings and poems. Again, you know, James Thurber and Flannery O'Connor are not the only ones that are drawing. Something that we keep seeing across all of our writers is that they also are, interestingly, artists. So she has drawings. And so what you can do on the left, you'll see that you can filter your search by different kinds of data points. So here's a lot of her sketches, and you can see these in the writing here. Clear your search, and you can look through collections, different series, subseries names. You can search by location, search by topics, and document types. So what I'd like you to do for this slide deck is to kind of explore, spend some time, take your time and kind of enjoy yourselves looking through what this particular database has to offer. I wonder what Art Calendars has. So click on that particular link. If you want to clear your search, please do, and you can start over again. So here's something, when you click on an item, it should tell you at the bottom what you're looking at. So it says Charlotte from Walter. So that's her husband later in life. It says Charles Walter Stetson to Gilman, includes poem and illustrated partial calendar. And so to see the full image, what you can do is click over here, original image, and it should bring up a much larger sort of instantiation of that. And what you can do is use your snipping tool to capture that image. And what I want you to do is, after you kind of look through all of these different things and decided on something that you think is kind of representative or interesting about her life in relationship to maybe some of her writing especially, to copy and paste that into our slide deck here under Intertextuality Unit 5. And so I explain here, just please include an image of a document. It could be a poem, drawing, notebook, or correspondence, painting, or journal from this database, and describe the selection. What are we looking at, and why did you make the selection you did? So there really isn't a right or wrong answer. I just want to know what you're thinking about and why you're interested. For the reading collaboratively portion this week, please read through. You're going to have a total of 3 comments, which I outline here how to sort of go about those comments. I have something in mind for those 3 comments, and then 2 replies. Of course, you can have more than 3 comments if you like, but that's sort of the sort of for full points to include the 3 total comments with specific stipulations here. I wanted to just say very briefly a few things about this 1892 short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. So Charlotte Perkins Gilman, you can look up sort of her biography on Wikipedia if you'd like, but she wrote this short story on a June day in Pasadena, California, with, quote, the thermometer at 103. And I'm quoting from a sort of an essay by Elaine Showalter called On the Yellow Wallpaper, which was published in 2009. The Yellow Wallpaper, it's a first-person narrative, a secret journal covering 3 months from approximately June 1st to the end of August. Its author is an unnamed woman who has been taken by her physician-bound husband, John, to a secluded house in the country, a colonial mansion, a hereditary estate, in order to cure a nervous illness. A slight hysterical tendency is what it's called. She has developed after the birth of her son. The house is isolated 3 miles from the nearest village. On its extensive grounds there are high hedges and locked gates, and inside the house at the top a large room with barred windows, rings on the walls, and an iron bed nailed down to the floor, which is gouged and splintered. While the room's yellow wallpaper has been ripped and torn, this is the bedroom the narrator and her husband share at night, although she is alone in it during the long summer days when she secretly writes in her diary. So there's a lot going on here in this short story, and I want to sort of see your comments, and I'm going to post one more video on Wednesday that kind of explains some of the background and some of the approaches to reading this particular short story as we move throughout the week. So have a great week and talk to you again soon.